Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's lecture, which is our last event in the Dean Speaker Series for this academic year. And in that light, it's great to see such a wonderful turnout of students, faculty, and friends from around the community. As you know, the Dean Speaker Series was created to bring to campus outstanding scholars and leaders from the fields of business, education, and government to share thoughts and insights with UNC Kenan-Flagler, the university, and the community at large. The Dean Speaker Series is made possible through the support of the Archie K. Davis Endowment and is managed primarily by our students who select and invite the leaders they are most interested in learning from. And tonight is no exception. At the conclusion of this evening's lecture, Professor Sriaman Venkataraman, who is an assistant professor of marketing, will offer a vote of thanks to our speaker on behalf of faculty, staff, and students. And we have a lot of special guests tonight, but I try to always recognize the other deans who join us, so I'd like to particularly welcome Susan King, who is Dean of the UNC School of Journalism and Mass Communications. Welcome, Susan. Thank you for joining us this evening. And as you will see when I introduce our speaker, there's a particular reason that Susan is here. So tonight we are honored to welcome back to Chapel Hill Jason Kilar. Jason serves as the CEO of Hulu, the online TV service whose mission is to help people find and enjoy the world's premium content when, where, and how they want it. Under Jason's leadership since the formative days of the venture in 2007, Hulu has grown to become a leading provider of premium online video with more than 410 professional content providers, 38 million unique monthly users, including me yesterday and my wife Jan, I'm not sure if we count as one or two, and over 1,000 advertisers. Jason joined Hulu after nearly a decade of experience at Amazon.com, where he served in a variety of key leadership roles. After writing the original business plan for Amazon's entry into the video business, he ultimately became vice president and general manager of Amazon's North American media business, which included the company's books, music, and video categories. He later served as Senior Vice President of Worldwide Application Software, where he led an organization of world-class technologists to innovate on behalf of merchants and consumers via Amazon's websites across the globe. So you can see that Jason has had a career that it would have been literally impossible to have until just the last few years. Jason began his career with the Walt Disney Company, where he worked for Disney Design and Development. He received his MBA from Harvard Business School and graduated Phi Beta Kappa from the Kenan-Flagler Business School and the UNC School of Journalism and Mass Communications, hence Susan's being here with us today. So that's the formal stuff about Jason, and that's the introduction. But I will say, just from a personal standpoint, that my wife Jan and I have really enjoyed getting to know Jason. We had a wonderful brunch together in Santa Monica a few months ago, to which Jason rode his bicycle, which I'm still getting a kick out of. And then went back home on his bicycle to go ride with his kids or something. Also, I really appreciate that Jason was willing to provide a comment of support for our online MBA program about 2 years ago, when a lot of people were still thinking that the online MBA program was probably the stupidest idea that they'd ever heard of. And Jason was willing to help us see around the corner and provide some support and be willing to be interviewed for that, which was really important. Also, Jason was the winner of the Kenan-Flagler BSBA Alumni Merit Award in 2010. And if you go to the business school's website, you'll see a video of Jason with some of his team at Hulu talking about their work and exemplifying the kinds of things that we hope that the business school stands for. So I couldn't be more delighted to welcome, and please help me welcome, Jason Kilar.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very, very much. I feel very underdressed, and I apologize for that. I spend my days on the West Coast, where the dress code is far more relaxed, so I apologize if this is sort of the way I dress every day, and so actually I stepped it up a little bit. So you wouldn't want to see how I get dressed every day. It is so good to be back here. I attended UNC Chapel Hill. I'll get into that in just a little bit, but suffice it to say that it is so fun to be back here. Carolina means so much to me personally. It means a lot to me professionally, and it's just been a great day so far, and I'm looking forward to sharing some things that I hope are of relevance to folks that are here in the audience. So without further ado, and one thing I want to say as well is that I'm going to leave ample time at the end for Q&A because my history has sort of kind of shown that the discussion can be very helpful in terms of what I share with you, but a lot of times the most valuable portion is the Q&A at the end. So I will say that there'll be plenty of time for Q&A, and I would also ask you guys to ask anything you want. There is no such thing as a rude question. Ask any question you want, and I'll do my best to answer them. If it's incredibly rude, I may not answer it, but feel free to ask it. So with that, my name is Jason, which it sounds like you guys know that now. And I wanted to share two things. I wanted to share a little bit about my story in ways that perhaps might be relevant to the students that are here. And then I also wanted to share lessons learned, again, in the interest and hope of sharing some things so that maybe you guys can avoid some of the mistakes that I've made and maybe stumble into some of the good fortune that I've stumbled in along my career as well. So two things that I hope to share, and I hope it'll be very entertaining and enjoyable for you. So let's start with my story. Little trivia here. I took this on my iPhone 48 hours ago. It was in Whistler, Canada, where I just came from. It was amazingly beautiful. I highly recommend it to anybody who hasn't been to Canada. Whistler's a beautiful place. So let's start with my story. So Jan will really appreciate this. So I grew up in Pittsburgh. I am a huge Pittsburgh fan. I grew up there, and I will be a lifelong Steelers fan, or Stillers, for those of you that are from Pittsburgh know it to be. I am one of 6 children, and so that's me here in the middle. And the number of where I grew up and my number of siblings are very much defining qualities of who I am. I am so thankful that I grew up in a large family and that I grew up in Pittsburgh. In many ways, it sort of defined a lot of who I've become as an adult. And there's not a day that goes by where I don't think about that. I actually have 4 little kids myself, and in today's day and age, people think that's an obscenely high number. This is a lot more obscene than 4. So this is my mom and dad. It's funny, when I pulled this up, I'm like, wow, they look kind of like from Mad Men. Growing up, I did not think they looked this cool, but like, when I put this in, I'm like, wow, that's kind of like Don Draper and one of the people that work at the office there. It just it was really interesting. But anyway, so that's my mom and dad. My mom was a writer, crazy creative writer, very imaginative. She wrote a creative column for our newspaper in Pittsburgh, and so for those of you that might know this name, Irma Bombeck, she was kind of like the Irma Bombeck of Pittsburgh. So great comedic style. And my dad was an engineer. My grandfather was an engineer. My uncles were engineers. This was before computer science was a degree. So I was always sort of in an environment that had a little bit of left brain and a little bit of right brain. And again, that defined who I was as well. And it was interesting because when I was growing up, we were always the first family in the neighborhood that would get the latest technology because of my dad. And so here I am installing our Apple IIe computer. And we were the first ones to get an Apple IIe computer. Before that, we had a Commodore 64. I used to access the internet with an old-fashioned phone that you would put on cups. And that's the way you would literally connect to the internet with a dial-up phone. And as I say that, I realize you must think I'm like 70 years old. And there was a time when that happened. And so this is just the way I grew up. So I was always sort of very fortunate to be exposed to technology, but yet also have a real appreciation for storytelling and imagination. And I got the latter from my mom and the former from my dad and my grandfather and my uncles. So when I was a kid, we went to the Magic Kingdom in Florida, in Orlando. And this was a trip that changed my life. And I'll get back to that in just a little bit. But that was a really important part of my growing up. I am a Tar Heel. And I didn't just do this for this audience, I promise. So at Hulu's headquarters, one of the things that we do, we're real big believers in the value of culture, and we're real big believers in mechanisms to reinforce that culture. So one of the mechanisms that I introduced to the company was that every single team member, when they join the company, they get their photo taken. And they get their photo taken by a professional photographer. And it might sound actually expensive to invest in this, but this has been one of the smartest investments that Hulu's made. We take a picture of everyone, and all we ask them to do is to show what they're passionate about. And so I chose Carolina. This is 4 years old or something like that, 5 years old. because this is really one of my passions. And what's great about it is that if you come into Hulu's headquarters, the first thing you see is this wall of 700 people's photos, and they're literally sharing with you what their passions are. And so it sends a very strong signal to visitors to the company and team members of the company that the first and most important thing that matters for Hulu is the team. And so I'm a Tar Heel. I'm very passionate about Carolina. My wife is a Tar Heel. We got married here. I don't know what else there would be to say that I'm more of a Tar Heel than that. So just know that I'm a Tar Heel. When I was at Carolina, I was looking to get a job at companies that did not recruit here. And so I had kind of the adventure that I'm sure a lot of students have here, where you've circled some companies that you'd really like to get to know better and spend time with and ideally work with over the course of a summer. And so for my junior year summer, I really wanted to work for this company. So I actually wrote a comic strip. And it was, I sort of drew myself in an envelope getting dropped on an executive's desk, the CEO of the company, and then I would jump out of the envelope and use the things that were on the desk to actually explain sort of my strengths and skills and how I could contribute. And long way of saying that I actually got the job. I got the job, and it was actually for the Walt Disney Company. So I was an intern at the Walt Disney Company, and that changed my life because I was able to go and get this job that really didn't exist. And I did it over the course of my junior year summer. And it was such an enjoyable experience that I actually went and worked at the Walt Disney Company after graduating from Carolina. Then I went to Harvard Business School 2 years after I was at the Walt Disney Company. I have snow here in this picture because it was bloody cold up there. It was an incredibly cold experience. Not that I'm damaged by it, but it was very, very cold. So when I was at Harvard, I had the good fortune, it was interesting, there was a class that was being taught there. This is in the fall of '96, spring of 1997. I think it was the first business school class that was ever fully focused on the internet. In fact, there was no real lexicon for sort of what internet businesses were. So this young professor who didn't have tenure, he was a bit of an outlier on campus, he created this course called Managing in the Market Space. That was his made-up term for what an internet business could be. And there was only like 6 companies that were really making a go at it as 100% internet-based businesses. There was companies like Peapod and Streamline. These were grocery delivery companies over the internet. And then there was a book-selling business called Amazon. And this gentleman wrote a business school case study about Amazon when they had 17 team members. And so very, very tiny little company. And so he wrote this in the fall of '96. And when I was thinking about what to do after business school, I thought that it would be great to go out and start a company right out of business school. And I was thinking a lot about that. I also had some interviews with sort of big companies, but that didn't really excite me. And this professor, Jeffrey Raport, said, well, hey, we haven't read the case yet, but I've interviewed this guy for the case study, with a company called Amazon. And I actually had bought a book there, so I knew what it was. And he's like, I think you guys would really get along. And so when Jeff came to close the case study, he and I met in this professor's office, and that actually ended up turning into a job. So basically, I met Jeff Bezos, at the time when he was just selling books online, and we were able to sort of get to know each other. I flew out to Seattle later that week, met with a very small team that was at headquarters at the time, and that turned into a pretty big adventure. Specifically, it was a 9-year adventure in Seattle, Washington. And so I was up in Seattle for 9 years, did a host of really different things, everything from just trying to help people know that there was this book company that was selling books online, to getting into other categories like video and DVD, and then ultimately expanding globally as well. So that was my Amazon adventure. And then you can't really see this, but this is the Santa Monica Pier. And that's when it was, I thought it would be time for a new adventure. And specifically, that adventure would be down in Southern California. And it was for a company that didn't even have a name yet. It was an idea that was the combination of 2 major media companies, Fox and NBC Universal, a gentleman named Peter Chernin at Fox and Jeff Zucker at NBC Universal. And I got into the mix with their discussions, as did Providence Private Equity. And at the end of the day, there was a go made of actually building a company. And again, a lot of foresight from Peter Chernin and Jeff Zucker in their respective companies and leadership. And so what we did was we got about building the business. And so we rented office space, opened up that office space. It was very lonely that first day. It was just me, and I had to go out and do basically an Ocean's 11 style kind of approach to hiring, which is I flew to different cities to go pick up team members. And it's not an exaggeration to say that. Literally, before my first day in the office, I flew to Beijing to go and acquire a very tiny company who was run by a gentleman that I had a lot of respect for, who ended up being Hulu's first CTO. And so the gentleman, the second one from the left. And then I also did the same with business school classmates. So for those of you that are business school classmates of each other, know that it's a small world. Two of the first probably 20 hires that I made were business school section mates, and they're still at Hulu today in senior executive capacities. And then basically tried to convince a lot of other people from Seattle to move down to Santa Monica. So this picture is the original crew of Hulu back when it was just maybe 10 of us or so. And this was the night that we went to private beta. So the world, kind of had pretty much assumed that this new venture that didn't even have a name was probably going to be dead on arrival. And what we did is we put newspapers up on the windows to kind of block the outside world so we could just focus on building a great product that we ourselves would want to use. And so this is the crew the night of our private beta launch, and us kind of showing our baby to the world for the first time. It was quite an evening. And so we launched Hulu. And by the way, for those of you that don't know what Hulu means, it comes full circle. Hulu is a Mandarin word. So the first trip I took for what was to become Hulu was to Beijing. And what Hulu is it's a gourd. And there's a Mandarin old saying that describes the Hulu as the holder of precious things. So they would used to hollow out these gourds and put their jewelry in and precious things. So when we were creating Hulu, we wanted to create a service that delivered premium content, valuable content, not user-generated content, but the most valuable content. And so we wanted it to be the holder of precious things. So that's where the name Hulu comes from. This is an example of Hulu Plus on tablets. You might know us from our Super Bowl commercial. This is something that we did, which many people thought we were insane to do, which is the very first advertisement we did for Hulu was on the Super Bowl, which isn't an inexpensive way to advertise, I might add. And so we had a lot riding on this. And I remember there's a very great professor and good friend here at the journalism school, John Sweeney, who I remember I was emailing him saying, yeah, we're going to actually do this advertisement. We're actually going to try and get it on the Super Bowl. And I was telling him about it, and I sent him a rough cut of it and all that stuff. And it was very fun because we had a good back and forth. And he was very supportive and very good. And after it all happened, and it was a big success, and the business grew 60%, he kind of let it leak. He's like, listen, I wasn't really sure that was going to work. And a lot of creative things don't work, but he was very good about not bursting my bubble, which was great. The business has done really well. We've been so fortunate as a company to go from this thing that nobody thought was going to work to something that really has momentum. So this past year we did almost $700 million in revenue. Our pace of growth is incredibly large this quarter as well. We're very excited about the path ahead. So we like up and to the right charts. So that's my story thus far, and you can see the different photos from it. I announced in early January, after 5.5 years, that I was going to later this year start my next adventure with actually the current CTO of Hulu and some others. And so I'm very, very excited about that. I don't have anything to share about it yet. I will later this year, I promise. But I don't have anything to share about it right now, but will. But I wanted to, at this point, basically share with you lessons I've learned. So now that you know where I came from and the key moments in my life that have defined me, I thought it might be helpful to share with you lessons that I've learned that have really impacted Hulu, and it's impacted my ability to build, along with a lot of great people on the Hulu team. So this is a roller coaster that probably only one person in the audience will know. It's at a place called Kennywood Park in Pittsburgh, and it's a roller coaster called the Jackrabbit. And the Jackrabbit, a couple of things. So Kennywood Park, for a kid that grew up in Pittsburgh, is an incredibly nice park. It's an amusement park and a big part of my childhood. And the Jackrabbit is kind of one of the major features of Kennywood Park. Now, what's interesting is, as an adult, you look at this thing and it's like a death trap. It's like crickety. It moves in the wind probably. It's just it's a really ill-designed and not upkept kind of thing. At least certainly based on these photos. So that's all I knew growing up as a kid until I was about 10 years old. When I was 10, my family, we all hopped in our Chevy Beauville 12-passenger cargo van, basically, with little church pew-like seats. And we went down to Orlando, and we went to Magic Kingdom. And we went under the train station where you kind of enter into the Magic Kingdom, and you get this view of Cinderella's castle in Main Street with this forced perspective that leads your eyesight down to Cinderella's castle. And this changed my life. It absolutely changed my life, because up until that point, all I knew was the Jackrabbit and Kennywood Park. Whereas this, it was like nothing I had ever seen. There was, everything was designed, everything was kept up, everything was just beautiful. I mean, it was the kind of thing that made such an impression on me that I'll never forget. And it actually caused me to actually do some things as a sort of a teenager and a middle school student that most middle school students don't do. And so, and by the way, this is a picture from that day. I have this like menorah-eating grin because I was so happy about sort of discovering this place that I'd never seen something so high quality. I had never seen an amusement park that didn't have any debris on the ground. I had never seen something where all the paint was fresh and things just fit. I mean, it really was the kind of thing that it was just so surreal to me, and it was inspiring as well. So what I did, and this is going to sound awkward, but true, is that over the course of the next like 5 to 7 years, I would try and read everything I could about the Walt Disney Company and Walt Disney the entrepreneur. I just couldn't get enough of it, because I just had to find out who is the person that caused this great thing to happen, and how did they cause these things to happen. It just was so unusual to see. And so I did a lot of research. I read biographies, autobiographies. There's one autobiography that Walt Disney and his daughter wrote, and there's obviously a lot of commentary about the business. And so I did a lot of research, and here's what I found. So I tried to figure out what Walt Disney's childhood was about and the decisions that he made. So he spent time in Kansas City. And this is him at an ad agency in Kansas City, where he was an artist for this ad agency in Kansas City. He's the one in the left, in the back row there. And he, around this time, there was this animation, this first animation. It was called the Funny Faces of something, the Humorous Phases of Funny Faces from 1906. And this is what it looked like. This is what animation was in the time when Walt was sort of becoming into his own. This was basically, this is how advanced it was. This is what it did. It very, very crude. And most people, like this was it. They looked at this and said, yeah, okay, that's some animation right there. And so, and that was it. And most of the world, most human beings on the planet looked at that and said, okay, that's animation. That's, they took it at face value. Whereas what Walt Disney did is that what he did is he said, well, wait a minute. Like, that's pretty cool, but what if a feature film could be created through the art of animation? Could that be possible? Shouldn't it be possible? And he asked that question. He asked that highly innovative question. And that's exactly what he did. Many, many years later, he actually nearly bankrupted the Walt Disney Company, which before Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs had only done shorts. He nearly bankrupted the company. He took on debt. This is before Walt Disney Company ever went public. They didn't have access to things like the public markets. It was a tremendously sort of stressful time for the whole company. Walt got into business with his brother, Roy, and Roy strongly counseled him not to do this foolish errand. He's like, don't do it. This will never be successful. We're going to tank the company. But he insisted on it because he was relentless about pursuing a better way, specifically through animation. And that's what we define at Hulu as innovation. I'm sure there's fancy words for innovation. The way that we define innovation is the relentless pursuit of better ways. If you do that, you'll end up with things like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And that's exactly what Walt Disney did. And what's fascinating about the more I got to study Walt Disney, it wasn't just about animation. This is the way he lived his life. So for those of you that have spent time in Southern California, you probably recognize this photo. This is a merry-go-round in Griffith Park. So Griffith Park is a park in the hills of Southern California. And this was around, it's around today, and it was also around when Walt Disney had 2 little daughters. And he used to take his daughters here on Saturday, and he would let them ride the horses, and he would sit on the park bench and just watch them and have a good time. Now, what was interesting is that the horses didn't have, they weren't kept up. So they had chipped paint, There was dirt on the ground. Kind of the sides of the merry-go-round needed polishing and fixing up. The kids were okay with it, but Walt would sit there in the park bench and just kind of be a little bit disappointed because he himself was not having a great time, and he noticed a lot of these sort of chipped noses and things that were in need of repair. And so he asked the question, what if a place existed that could entertain kids and adults alike? And literally, this is where he dreamed up Disneyland. This is literally, and if you go back and look at his interviews with him and the history of Walt Disney Land in Anaheim, California, it was because of those Saturday sessions with his daughter at the Griffith Park merry-go-round. And it was amazing that he was able to do this just by being relentless about asking the question, what if, and then just relentlessly pursuing better ways. Now, switching gears, because we're all a product of our own experiences, Amazon, probably one of the reasons why I was so attracted to Jeff Bezos and the Amazon mission was because Jeff Bezos was all about innovation and the relentless pursuit of better ways. He would ask what-if questions as well. So in 1997, the question that he asked, and was very clear to a number of us that joined the company in 1997 was, well, what if a bookstore could offer every book ever written? Pretty audacious in 1997 and in 1996 to even ask that question. Because at the time, the maximum number of titles sold in any environment was 134,000 titles. Amazon launched with over 1 million titles for sale. And the other question that he asked was, well, what if that bookstore were always open? And that was the simple sort of question of what if, combined with this relentless pursuit of a better way versus physical bookstores. Now, what happened, as we all know, is Amazon Books. This is the early website in early 1997 when I was talking with the team there and Jeff. And it was funny, there wasn't even a search box. So that's how sort of dated this is. There was no search box, so you couldn't search for a book. You had to click on browsing and things like that. We solved that very quickly. But it was this relentless pursuit of a better way, this great innovation. And by the way, just to give you guys a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, this is a fulfillment center of how those books get to you. So to give you a sense of sort of the scope, this warehouse, there's 80 of them around the world. And this is just a small little corner of an Amazon fulfillment center. The largest one is 1.2 million square feet, which would have about 28 Kenan football fields in it. And there's 80 of them across the world. 230 items that are sold every second. And I think the max delivery is 2 million items in a week. So you can see the scale of these things. Most people only see the website and the little cardboard box that shows up. But there's a whole heck of a lot of logistics happening behind the scenes. So, and these are expanding like lightning all over the world. So as a result of sort of studying Walt Disney, spending some time at Walt Disney, being so fortunate to be part of the Amazon team that kept on asking what-if questions and being innovators and pioneers, you're probably not surprised to learn that at Hulu, we've assembled a team that asks those same what-if kind of questions and are relentless about pursuing better ways. And the questions that we asked in 2007 were very simple and very ambitious, which is, well, what if TV were available when, where, and how people actually wanted it? At the time, it was seen as this crazy, ridiculous thing, which is, no, let people actually watch content that they want to watch, television content, where they want to watch it, how they want to watch it, have advertising that's relevant to them as opposed to one-to-many. And so this is the question that we posed, and we're very fortunate to be able to go off and do it in the form of Hulu and Hulu Plus, both in the US and in Japan now. And that's innovation. That's the relentless pursuit of better ways. And so the questions you might ask is, so, okay, that's fine, innovation, I get it. A lot of people talk about that. But does all this innovation really matter? There's this great analysis that Forbes has done. And they've looked at 5-year stock returns in terms of innovators versus the balance of the market based on percentage of revenues that people invest in research and development and patent filings and things like that. And what they found is the innovators far outpace the rest of the market in terms of financial return to shareholders. So it's not just innovation for innovation's sake. It's not innovation for PR. It really is because when you go down these blind alleys, when you're relentless about pursuing better ways, oftentimes what you'll end up doing is better serving customers. And if you can do that in an advantaged way by building a moat around the castle, you've created real value. So here's what I would love to say that I hope can help you, and then we'll get over to question and answer mode, which is, there's what I found in my life, because when I was in your shoes in undergrad and in business school, was there was so much temptation and there's so much societal pressure to go and take the job that was being handed to you or was sort of the respectable thing to do. It was so hard for me to step away from that pressure and actually listen to what my heart was telling me and what I was really passionate about. Because oftentimes that is a lot harder to do because it's uncertain, there's a lot more risk to it. Financially, it's a complete black box. You don't know sort of which way it's going to go. And as I say this, I hope to gosh I'm not counseling you guys to sort of turn down your great jobs, but I do want to say that I do think in life it's really important to listen for your passions. And sometimes people are lucky and figure out their passions early in life. Other times it takes a little bit longer, but look for your passions, listen for your passions. And then also, more importantly, follow them. What a shame it would be if you lived your life, following someone else's passions or someone else's expectations. I found that just sort of listening to who you are and the things that naturally excite you, if you can somehow marry that with what you do professionally, you'll never work. It'll always be a mission. It won't be a job. It'll be very hard, but it won't be a job. Another thing that I found, which is very important, and by the way, I've never used this image except for in this room, so a lot of these images, in fact, is that it's really important to have conviction. And I mentioned, I have Tyler Hansbrough here because I follow Carolina a lot remotely from the West Coast, and I've always been impressed with when Tyler Hansbrough was at Carolina. It was almost like he had this conviction. He was willing Carolina to win games, and it literally wasn't because he was the most gifted or talented in terms of his DNA or skill set. He was very talented, of course, versus most people in the world, but I don't think he will go down in history as sort of Carolina's most talented athlete. But I wouldn't be surprised if he goes down as one of Carolina's most convicted, in terms of having conviction. Convicted would be bad. I'm gonna rewind that one. He would be the one with most conviction. He just literally exhibits this will to just win and to achieve his goals. And so I've found in life that you need to have conviction. If you're sort of a wet noodle in a professional setting, or quite frankly in any setting, you're not going to, I don't think you're going to get to achieve your goals. But if you can have conviction, wow, that is, if you can have passion and conviction, those are two of the three most ingredients that I found to really kind of achieve great things. And then the last thing that I sort of want to add to that cocktail, if I could, is this relentless pursuit of better ways. It's fascinating to think how recently phones were just phones, that you would call places and hope that somebody would be in that place so that you could make a connection. Whereas now, phones are computers and connections to the entire world, and now you call people, not places. And all this happened in like 15 years. And so it really is a reminder that just being relentless about improving better ways, the combination of that, plus conviction, plus your passions, what I found, and again, I first found this out as a 10-year-old and then studying about Walt Disney, is that, conviction and the relentless pursuit of better ways never fail to change the world. That's sort of the biggest lesson I've learned in my life, and I wanted to share with you. It's one of those things that I was very fortunate and have been very fortunate to sort of find my passions relatively early in life, and then thankfully, because of my parents in Carolina and other places, I was able to marry that with sort of understanding the value of conviction and really understanding the value of innovation or the relentless pursuit of better ways. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that any of you might have. Yes?
What is television in 2013, and is television still relevant?
It's a great question. So I'll repeat the questions because I have the mic. So one is, what is television in 2013, and is television still relevant, or will television still be relevant? Okay. So for the first question, I can tell you what television is not in 2013. It's not a piece of hardware. And it used to be that television was a piece of hardware. It was a thing that you hung on the wall in your living room, and that was what television was. Whereas what television in 2013 really is it is a symbol of quality. And so television is a way to say, oh yeah, well that story, whether it's a drama, a 44-minute drama or a 22-minute sitcom, that is of a certain quality that is called television. So I think that's what television is. It's more something used to describe a quality, a level of quality, as opposed to describing a piece of hardware. And then in terms of is television still relevant, I think it's incredibly relevant. And it's amazing that despite a tremendous amount of technology, a tremendous amount of change in so many industries, that television is so resilient. And I don't mean television necessarily in terms of the business model of television, but I mean the actual content. So human beings over the course of the last 50 years have watched more and more television each year for the last 50 years, which is stunning in many ways. If you look across the world, and certainly in America, people watch between 3 and 5 hours of television a day. It ranks just behind sleep and work. And so literally that's the top 3 sort of things that account for people's minutes in a given day. And so I don't think that changes necessarily in terms of in the aggregate. What I do think will change is the kinds of things that people consume. I think historically for the last 50 to 60 years, it really hasn't changed. The format has been the format, which is a half-hour program, an hour program, or a live event, sporting event or otherwise, like the Oscars like last night. I actually think you're going to see quite a bit of innovation in the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to formats and the kinds of things that people will consume. So that's where I think things are heading. Yes?
Do you think the aggregator model is going to go away? If you look at things like Netflix was an aggregator. Now they're putting out their own content. Same with Showtime, HBO. Is that aggregator model something that's going to go away?
I think that it's a great question. So the question is the aggregator model online going to go away? Netflix had started where they licensed everything, or as much as they could get their hands on. Now they're doing more targeted series like House of Cards and things like that. I think that there's going to be 2 types of businesses. I think there's going to be channels, which basically follow the HBO model, where they have a certain set of content that is largely exclusive to them, and that is their business. They basically, if you want that content, you have to subscribe to that service, and that's the way you get it. I do think, though, there's going to be other businesses that will be aggregators. And it could be that a service like Netflix could be a part of those aggregators. Reed Hastings, who runs Netflix, has often said that he'd have no problem, and I think he'd actually really like to be distributed by traditional cable companies. I think he would love it if when you sign up for your big bundle that you could check a box and sign up for Netflix as well. And so I do think you're going to see 2 types of businesses. You're going to see channels, and then you're going to see platforms or aggregators where all those channels can live. Yes, in the back.
Can you talk a little bit about how Hulu personalizes the recommendations for each and every user, and what goes on behind the scenes in terms of analyzing data?
Sure. So the question is, what do we do to help personalize the Hulu service? And we do a lot of personalization. You might be surprised to know that in terms of our technology team, and the first folks that we hired were technologists, software development engineers. And we have a big kind of, our headquarters is where most of our engineers are in Santa Monica. We also have a software development center in Beijing, right on the edge of Tsinghua University, which is kind of the most prestigious university in China. And we actually share a parking lot wall with the computer science program. So it makes it very easy. We just need to burrow a hole in the wall so that interns can come back and forth. And then we also have a software development center in Seattle as well. And so we do a lot of heavy lifting by writing elegant algorithms that actually are able to use collaborative filtering and other means to basically, for those of you in the audience that don't come from this background, basically what we're doing is we're looking at the watch behavior of an individual and comparing that to the watch behavior of someone who has very similar viewing habits but have watched some other things that this person hasn't. And so that way we're able, it's a very simplified way of describing how it is we're able to recommend for you other episodes or other television shows or movies that we think you'll like based on the kind of the viewing behavior of other people that are very similar to you but not identical to you. So that's something that we've been doing and been refining our algorithms for the last 5.5 years. And it really does make a difference because when you can personalize a service, it's almost magical. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people in this audience, have gone to Amazon.com and sort of bought other things because people who bought this also bought that. And that's a real meaningful thing. And that was actually a part of Worldwide Application Software and the group that I ran at Amazon for a period of time. And it was something that Amazon invested very heavily in, and Hulu has as well. Yes?
So two questions for the business school students. So scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think you are like Walt Disney? And then number two, in business school, how many other Walt Disney have you met? I'm looking for like a market size.
Okay. So this is what we call a dangerous question. And the reason why is that I so revere Walt Disney that I just don't think anyone could ever hold a candle to him. And anybody who even remotely got into that discussion is very sort of is not self-aware. And so he's a hero of mine professionally, and I've always sort of kind of thought about it that way. I've never tried to sort of be anyone other than Jason Kilar. I mean, that's sort of who I was born, and that's who I'm always going to be. And so I'm inspired by the people that I've researched. I've been inspired by the people that I've worked for. I've been inspired by people that work for me. And I think that that's something that I think I learned here at Carolina a lot, which is to be a sponge and try and sort of soak up the goodness in people and in order to improve yourself. So, but I'd say that in business school, when I was in business school, it's rare to find someone that I think has that spark. It's kind of like this thing that you just sort of see it in their eyes in terms of sort of the ability to see around corners and sort of be so convinced and to have faith and to sort of jump off in some ways cliffs after these things. That's really rare. And by the way, it's not just an assessment of business school populations. That's rare in life. And I've so rarely seen that in life. The minute I met Jeff Bezos, I knew it instantly. And I can't say that about many people that I've met in this world. So it's a pretty rare thing. And I've just been blessed to research a guy that did it a lot and to work for a guy that did it. Yes?
Aside from Hulu Plus, do you think Hulu should be ad-based or free service or a subscription-based service?
So this is a great question. So this is a question about between Hulu, which is a free ad-supported service, or Hulu Plus, which is a subscription service that has ads in the television content that's in the service. It doesn't have ads in the movies, but it has ads in the television content. So the short answer is that I believe the more defensible business, the bigger business over the long term is Hulu Plus, the subscription business. And the reason why I say that is the way that media distribution works is that the person who has the better business model tends to get the best content in the best windows. And what I mean by that is you get fresher content, the more valuable content, the most popular content. And the reason why is that I'll just compare and contrast two services that are both in subscription video. So one is Hulu Plus and the other is Netflix. So with Hulu Plus, and they're both priced the same, $7.99 a month. Netflix has no ads whatsoever. Hulu Plus has about half the ads of traditional television in its television content. And so what that means is every month when we write a check to content owners, we write a check for between $8 and $9 a month for every subscriber. $4 to $5 comes from the subscription fee, and the remainder comes from the advertising revenue that goes back to the content owners. Whereas Netflix cuts a check of between $4 and $5. So $4 to $5 versus $8 to $9. That's a very big gap and a very big difference. And over time, as that service grows, we're able to write some very nice sized checks for content. And that's not surprisingly why we have current season content, and that's our focus because we have a business model that allows us to get current season content because we have that dual revenue stream. So I personally believe that the dual revenue stream business model is something that is incredibly valuable. I think that there's always options to offer ad-free versions for a subscription price, but that hasn't been our focus today. Yes?
As best you can, would you describe Apple TV?
So as best I can I describe Apple TV? So it's a great question because Apple TV gets thrown around so much, and really it refers to two different things, one which does not exist and the other which does exist. So the thing that does exist is a little hockey puck sized piece of hardware called Apple TV. And what that is it is a box that is connected, allows you to connect to the internet and to connect that box to a traditional television set. So what that means is if you want to start consuming content over the internet, you can do so if you buy this little hockey puck plug it into your television, and connect to your wireless connection as well, or your corded internet connection. So just think of it as a hack. It's a little tiny piece of hardware that makes a dumb TV a smart TV. So that's Apple TV. There's another thing that the press talks about probably 100 times more, which is the other Apple TV, which is this yet-to-be-released product that nobody knows whether it exists or not. And it's kind of, and I personally think that eventually we will see an Apple TV. I think most people in technology believe that we'll see an Apple TV. But it turns out that manufacturing a piece of hardware on its own is a very challenging business in today's day and age. Instead, what you need to have is a piece of hardware that has a set of highly attractive services that are part and parcel with it. And Apple TV, at least based on the fact that it doesn't exist, likely does not exist because it doesn't have those services yet. Meaning, like, what are you going to do when you turn it on? And so I do think that the hockey puck Apple TV is a very good bridge to get to a real Apple TV. And Apple's chosen to be very persistent and patient with regards to that journey. I think they're wise to do so because it would be a very damaging thing to go out with a piece of hardware that people turn on and say, well, wait a minute, I can't do anything with it aside from a traditional television set. So that's what Apple TV is and what Apple TV is not. Yes?
Would you like to do a little forecast of 3 to 5 years how this media space shakes out?
So 3 to 5 years. I would not want to, if I were graduating Carolina, I would not want to jump into a newspaper business. So I've been saying that for years. So I think there's certainly profits in the newspaper business, but I think that if you look at the trend of advertising in print, it's going down and down and down, and it's shifting digital. I think television is going to be very robust going forward, and that is even in the face of alternative formats and content. Storytelling, I think, has never been stronger in television. When you look at what's going on AMC networks, what's going on with A&E, what's going on with all these cable channels, FX, it is a golden age of storytelling with regards to the television model. I think there will eventually be some pressure on the big bundle in that all of America is being asked to spend about, I think, $15 a month now for sports content, even if you don't watch it. So when you write your check to Time Warner Cable or Comcast, you're paying about $15 for sports channels, whether or not you watch it. And $15 is starting to get to be pretty high, and it might get to $20 and $25. That's a pretty big tax if you don't watch that content. And so I wouldn't be surprised if long-term that there's more of an a la carte model opportunity. No time soon, but I do think that that'll happen in the 3 to 5 year time horizon that you suggested. And what's that? We are not excluded for any kind of special reason other than we've chosen for economic reasons that is an unbelievably expensive game. So when you just look at one team alone, like the LA Dodgers, you're looking at sort of sports rights packages that are obscenely expensive, tens of billions of dollars get put out and committed to for 10, 15-year time horizons. So that's not a game that Hulu is in a position to play, and I don't think we would choose to play that game anytime soon at all. I think you have to have a model where you have almost 100 million households paying a very high price per month, which is what you have with the big bundle and pay TV. So I don't think any internet company is going to get into big-time sports anytime soon, simply because of the economics. It is, the sports business is it's amazing as a ratings driver for the NFL, for example, but it's unbelievably priced. It is priced to perfection by the NFL. They do an unbelievably good job pricing their content, and so it's probably the best-run league in the world. But in terms of the evolution of media, I think you'll see print decline. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens with radio. Because with radio, there's this digital transformation, which could be very interesting and sort of keep radio overall as a category stable. And then with television, I think it's going to be very robust. But make no mistake, across all different formats, the movement to digital is going to be inevitable because it's advantaged. You can be personalized. You can have a flexibility of formats. The advertising is so much better targeted. You have higher recall and higher purchase intent. So those are trends that are inevitable and will kind of proceed, I believe, will proceed over the next 3 to 5 years. Yes?
YouTube is a magical thing for the content creators and content consumers, but they keep bumping up against copyright and people who think
Yes.
Is YouTube viable for the long term, and will the copyright issue get sorted out?
So I think YouTube is incredibly viable for the long term. It is a force, and it's a force because of the reach that they have. Now there's the copyright issues are very real, and I would suspect that most of the content that is on there that is copyright protected, the copyright owners don't realize it's on there, and you know, in some cases that you know. I think what has to happen long term with YouTube, and make no mistake, even with that issue, it's an unbelievably great business that I think is going to have a very, very strong future. I think what should happen is all the copyright owners should have the opportunity to be able to tag their content and say, hey, I'm the owner of this content, and I'd like to make money off of it. So put ads against it and give me my fair share of the ads that run against that. And some copyright owners will do just that. Others will say, no, thank you. I want this off the service forever because I want to make money elsewhere with it. And that'll play out. But the interesting thing about YouTube is that you don't have to have everything to be a great service. You just have to have enough that makes for a delightful and entertaining session for a consumer. And so I can tell you that if anybody can deliver 200 million engaged users on a monthly basis, that's a business. That's a huge business. That's bigger than a lot of television networks, quite frankly. And that's what you're seeing with YouTube. And they're figuring it out. They're trying to figure out how to get their advertising rates higher by having more premium content and sort of focusing the light on that part of their business. But they're in a very good spot because of their reach and the fact that they've got just so many clips of content that there really is a lot of good stuff in there. Yes? With the
Hi. I'm curious about how Hulu demonstrates its value to some of the content providers. I know that Hulu, as you mentioned, was a joint venture between NBC and Fox and, of course, ABC. And now NBC is owned by Comcast, and there's an Xfinity product as well. Where does Hulu sit in kind of that ecosystem of products that the content providers can sell their content to?
Yeah, so it's a great question. In terms of our unique positioning, we think about product differentiation on two fronts. On one side, you've got Amazon and Netflix, and on the other side, you have traditional television, which is sort of TV everywhere, or the big bundle that you get from Time Warner Cable or whomever. So we've worked very hard from day one to always keep that in mind, because if you're not doing anything unique, you shouldn't even be in business. And so what we aspire to do, and we have been doing, is we've been investing our resources in having full current season content that you can't get anywhere else. You can't get the entire current season of Modern Family anywhere else but on Hulu+. And that's the same can be said for over 235 television series over the course of this calendar year. That's a lot of television where you get full season pass, current season pass, that you don't get from Netflix, you don't get from Amazon, and you don't get from your cable provider or satellite provider. We also marry that with a tremendous amount of acquisitions, content acquisitions, from all over the globe exclusively. So we get shows like The Thick of It and The Wrongmans and a whole host of BBC programs and ITV and Channel 4 and others from the UK that are, you know, huge series that did not make it to America yet, and Hulu is introducing them. And ironically, we're introducing these series, and now they're getting option to be remade by Hollywood. And so we invest heavily in differentiated content that people really care about. And we're also doing original series ourselves. So we've done about 5 original series already, and we have 4 in production right now that you'll be hearing about later on this year. Way in the back, up in the catwalk. So the question is, will Hulu be going public anytime soon? We will not be going public anytime soon. So that's the answer to that question. Yes?
Do you see data limitations as being a realistic threat in the near future, and how does that affect the profitability of companies like Hulu and Netflix?
Yeah, so a question about broadband pricing to consumers. So right now in America, most broadband is all you can eat, all you can consume. But if we go metered in America, where they charge you per gigabit that you or megabit that you consume, what does that do? I think it's possible that it could become a part of America. It hasn't been something that we see as likely, simply because in the most valuable markets, there's actually an overbuild situation. And what I mean by that is that there is cable providers that provide internet, and then there's fiber providers like Verizon and AT&T. So you have real competition where, in Verizon's case, you have this amazing high-speed network that's being underused right now, and they're competing in a zip code, the same zip code for Time Warner Cable. And so if Time Warner Cable were to go metered pricing, oh my God, that's a gift from heaven from Verizon. Out comes the big marketing campaign that says, drop Time Warner Cable, come to Verizon, and it's all you can eat. And so in America, because of that overbuild situation, because of that competition in the biggest markets, I don't see that happening. You could see it happening maybe in markets around the globe where there is no diversity of service providers and there's a more monopoly. But then usually the government steps in to make sure that that doesn't happen in egregious ways. And the reason why is that having broadband is almost like having oxygen today. People, I think, would rather be without electricity than be without broadband. So governments tend to sort of step in and protect that because therein lies a lot of future innovation and growth for countries. And so it's been something we've looked at carefully, and we're never sort of anything less than neurotic about it. But it hasn't been something that has kept us up late at night. Yes?
So since Hulu and Netflix have kind of created this on-demand subscription idea of content, and Spotify is doing the same with music, which kind of media do you think is going to be next to kind of take off in this subscription?
So in terms of other areas that will take off in terms of subscription, I think that it's going to be fascinating to see if print can actually create enough value to have viable and scalable subscription services. And the reason why I say that is that for the last 15 years, with very few exceptions, all that great content has just been made available for free. All of it has. And so it's pretty tough to kind of go back once you go there and train people over the course of a generation. But I do think that there has to be stronger business models for journalism in the digital age. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see who's going to lead the way to be able to actually create sufficient value, because it's expensive to create that value, and then be able to sort of set the expectation that, hey, this is actually a paid-for aspect of our service, and this is actually the free. The New York Times is doing an experiment right now where you get 10 articles or so a month for free, and then thereafter you have to be a subscriber. A lot of people in Europe are testing different things. But I do think that whether or not they will be the ones that you suggest, I do think they're going to be the ones that try the most. Yes?
You mentioned the importance of culture.
Yes.
And I love the picture idea, by the way. I wondered if you could expand a little bit on how you developed the culture there and how that impacted employee engagement.
So I think that is the most important question that's been posed today. And the reason why is that culture really has been, along with the team, culture has been the secret sauce to Hulu's success. And I would argue it's the secret sauce to any successful company's journey. The Walt Disney Company has a very unique culture. Amazon has a very unique culture. What I'd say about culture is that you can't write a document, post it on the wall, and say, okay, good, we got culture. It is who you are, and it is who you are in those tough moments where you do the thing that's harder versus sort of the easy way out. And so the way that we, and again, this gets back to mechanisms that I mentioned earlier, the way that we thought about culture is that in the very kind of first week of Hulu's existence, the first thing we did was we put whiteboard wallpaper on the walls so that we could write things on the wall. And we wrote a mission statement in terms of what we wanted to be, to help people find and enjoy the world's premium content when, where, and how they wanted it. And then we also wrote down values and principles that we wanted the company to be defined by. And we use those words very carefully. In fact, from that whiteboard session, and they were truthful. They were sort of, all of us as senior leaders were willing to stand up and make that statement in terms of what we were going to stand for. And so it literally became a document called What Defines Hulu. And the way that we interview people is that, so I wrote this document called What Defines Hulu. I shared it with the team. They gave me some edits. We kind of memorialized it. Nobody gets hired at Hulu. Literally, all 700 people, not one has been hired without being vetted through the cultural document called What Defines Hulu. And if you just search online, it's public. Everybody can see it. That's the most important document we've ever written in our history. And it is a candid, open window into our soul in terms of what we stand for. And it's a tough document because you read it, and so many of my friends from business school read that document and they say, wow, that's very pleasant, good for you, but it's not for me. And they're successful. But then there's enough crazy people that read that document and say, wow, that is me. I need to work on that team. And that's when we find kind of kismet. And what we found in the last 5.5 years is that the single biggest predictor of success at Hulu is someone's match with what defines Hulu. Cultural fit is the single biggest predictor of success at Hulu. One more question. Yes.
This is a tremendous story, tremendous growth. It's very enlightening. What I'm wondering is, what do you think are the biggest challenges for Hulu in the next 3 years?
I think the biggest challenge for Hulu in the next 3 years is governance. The creation of Hulu really was because of the foresight and the prescience of Fox and NBC Universal, and then Disney came into the mix as well. Unbelievable leadership on the basis of the senior team at those 3 companies, combined with an amazing investor in Providence and a team that really was all in and continues to be all in. That was a necessary and the absolute right model with regards to growing Hulu. I think that it's interesting, the COO of News Corporation said this publicly before. He said, hey, managing JVs is a bear. And he's right. They're not easy. Thankfully, we as a team, along with the media partners, we've managed to do it. And it's not easy. It's not always fun, but we've managed to do it. And Hulu could never have been started any other way. I think that it will never cease to be a challenge from a governance perspective, which is why I list that as the single kind of biggest challenge for Hulu going forward, which is the governance. And I think that's sort of obvious for any JV. You always want to make sure, anytime you have a multi-party thing, you just need to make sure that people are on the same page, rowing in the same direction, and thinking about the business the same way over the long term. And I would have said the same thing, by the way, 5 years ago. And so just know that has always been the biggest challenge of Hulu, and I think will always be the biggest challenge of Hulu. So that was the last question, and I thank you very, very much, guys.
Wow, that was amazing. Thanks, Jason. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your lessons learned with all of us. In fact, I personally like to thank you, as I mentioned earlier as well. As someone who's been researching entertainment industry and digital media for some time, Hulu has actually extended my lifespan, research lifespan, by at least 10 years. It's opened up a whole new range of research questions for me to explore, which is fabulous. So personal thank you to Hulu. But nonetheless, it's the beauty of Hulu is it's completely changed the way we consume new media, right? It's changed the way we connect to media. So for example, it spawned a new generation of consumers who are known as the unplugged generation, who've never ever connected to new media or consumed media through a cable box. That's 11% of today's prime time. And it's only going to grow, right? It's changed the way we're going to be doing online advertising. Okay? It's also going to change how we measure the effectiveness of advertising and how we measure consumption of new media. All in all, it's going to be, even though this is a business that Jason has created, it's going to spawn a whole new range of businesses out there, many of which are going to be seeded by folks like you in the room right here, which is great. So it's a true game changer. Okay? And Jason possibly doesn't realize this, but I'm glad he shared his story with us. But Jason, to many of us, you are our Walt Disney. And there was a question that was raised. I don't know about the others, but there was a post that you had posted maybe a year ago, one of your blog posts, where you said it takes a certain level of craziness to do what Jason does. And if craziness buys you this, sign me up for craziness anytime, right? So on behalf of Kenan-Flagler, the university, UNC community, and the entire Tar Heel Nation, thank you, Jason.